Alice was sitting with her sister by the riverbank, feeling bored and sleepy. Suddenly, she noticed a white rabbit with pink eyes run by, muttering to itself about being late. Curiosity piqued, Alice followed the rabbit and saw it disappear into a rabbit hole. Without thinking, she followed and fell into the deep dark hole. The fall seemed endless, but eventually, Alice landed gently on a pile of leaves. She found herself in a hallway filled with doors of all sizes. A small key on a glass table caught her eye, but none of the doors fit the key. Then she discovered a tiny door behind a curtain. The key fit, but Alice was too big to enter. She found a bottle labeled "Drink Me," and after drinking it, she shrank to the right size to enter the door. As Alice ventured through the tiny door, she found herself in a beautiful garden. However, she soon realized she had forgotten the key on the table. Frustrated, she drank from another bottle and grew so large that she cried giant tears. These tears formed a pool around her. After eating a cake labeled "Eat Me," she shrank again and fell into the pool of tears, where she met a variety of strange creatures, including a mouse and birds. They swam together until they reached dry land. On the shore, Alice and the creatures tried to dry off by participating in a caucus race, a chaotic event where everyone ran in circles until they were dry. The race had no rules and no winner, but it succeeded in drying them off. Alice then listened to the mouse's long sad tail, shaped like a twisted knot. The rabbit ordered Alice to fetch his gloves and fan from his house. Inside, Alice found another bottle and drank from it, growing so large she was stuck in the house. Alice ate some magical pebbles that turned into cakes, causing her to shrink and escape the house. Alice came across a large mushroom, on which sat a blue caterpillar smoking a hookah. The caterpillar advised Alice to eat from the mushroom. One side would make her grow, and the other would make her shrink. Alice took pieces from the mushroom and experimented until she returned to her normal size. Alice arrived at the March Hare's house and joined a mad tea party. The trio behaved rudely and spoke in riddles, frustrating Alice. Alice found herself at a trial to determine who stole the Queen's tarts. The Knave of Hearts was the accused, and a variety of witnesses gave nonsensical testimonies. Alice found herself growing larger as the trial progressed. As she grew to her full size, she was called to give evidence. She boldly criticized the trial and its participants, refusing to be intimidated by the Queen's threats. The court descended into chaos, with the playing cards rising into the air and attacking Alice. Just as the cards surrounded her, Alice woke up to find herself back on the riverbank with her sister. Although the dream was over, Alice was left with a sense of curiosity and adventure that stayed with her as she returned to her everyday life.
In a small, impoverished village on the edge of a dense forest lived a woodcutter with his second wife and his two children, Hansel and Gretel. The family struggled to make ends meet, and one particularly harsh winter left them with almost no food. The stepmother, fearing starvation, convinced the woodcutter that they must abandon the children in the forest so that the two of them might survive. Hansel and Gretel overheard the plan and were terrified. Hansel comforted his sister and promised to find a way to save them. That night, he sneaked out and gathered white pebbles, which he hid in his pocket. The next day, their stepmother led Hansel and Gretel deep into the forest. As they walked, Hansel dropped the white pebbles one by one, creating a trail they could follow back home. Once they reached a clearing, their stepmother left them, promising to return. But night fell, and she never came back. By the light of the moon, the pebbles shone brightly, and Hansel and Gretel followed the trail back to their father's house. The woodcutter was overjoyed to see them, but their stepmother was furious and more determined than ever. A few days later, the stepmother tried again. This time, she gave them each a piece of bread and led them deeper into the forest. Hansel, unable to gather pebbles, crumbled his bread and left a trail of crumbs. However, the forest birds quickly ate the crumbs, and Hansel and Gretel found themselves lost. They wandered through the forest for days, hungry and scared. They survived on berries and drank from streams, but they grew weaker and more desperate with each passing day. On the third day, as they stumbled through the forest, Hansel and Gretel came across a miraculous sight, a house made entirely of candy. The walls were gingerbread, the roof was covered in icing, and the windows were made of sugar. Starving and tired, they began to eat pieces of the house. As they ate, an old woman emerged from the house. She seemed kind and invited them inside. She offered them a feast of pancakes, apples, and sweet milk. Hansel and Gretel, grateful and unsuspecting, accepted her hospitality. However, the old woman was not as kind as she appeared. She was a wicked witch who lured children to her candy house to eat them. The next morning, she locked Hansel in a cage and forced Gretel to do household chores. The witch planned to fatten Hansel up before cooking him. Gretel was heartbroken but determined to save her brother. Every day, the witch checked Hansel's finger. Hansel cleverly offered a bone instead. The witch, with poor eyesight, was deceived into thinking Hansel was still too thin. After weeks of this deception, the witch grew impatient and decided to eat Hansel anyway. She prepared the oven and instructed Gretel to check if it was hot enough. Gretel, sensing an opportunity, pretended not to know how to check. The witch, frustrated, demonstrated by leaning into the oven. Quick as a flash, Gretel pushed the witch into the oven and slammed the door shut. The witch screamed and tried to escape, but it was too late. Gretel freed Hansel from his cage, and they hugged tightly, relieved and happy to be reunited. As they prepared to leave, they discovered the witch's treasure chest filled with gold, jewels, and other valuables. They filled their pockets and a small bag with as much treasure as they could carry. Hansel and Gretel then found their way out of the forest, using the sun and stars to guide them. The journey home was long and arduous, but they were fueled by the hope of seeing their father again. After several days, they finally emerged from the forest and saw their village in the distance. Their father was overjoyed to see them and wept with relief. He had regretted abandoning them and had been miserable since they left. The stepmother, however, had fallen ill and passed away. Hansel and Gretel forgave their father, understanding that he had been manipulated by their stepmother. With the witch's treasure, Hansel, Gretel, and their father were no longer poor. They rebuilt their home and lived comfortably. Hansel and Gretel grew up to be wise and kind, always helping those in need and remembering the lessons they had learned in the forest. Once upon a time, in a small village far away, there lived a boy named Jack with his mother in a tiny cottage. Jack and his mother were very poor, and their only possession was an old cow named Bessie. One day, Bessie stopped giving milk, so Jack's mother decided they must sell her to get some money. "Jack, go to the market and sell Bessie. Try to get as much money as you can," said his mother. Jack set off for the market, feeling sad because he had to part with Bessie. On the way, he met a strange man dressed in bright clothes, carrying a bag filled with peculiar items. The man offered Jack 5 magic beans in exchange for the cow. Jack hesitated at first but eventually accepted the offer and took the beans home. When Jack returned and told his mother what had happened, she was furious. She threw the beans out of the window in anger. "You've been tricked, Jack. How could magic beans help us?" she cried. The next morning, Jack woke up to find a giant beanstalk had grown overnight right outside their cottage. The beanstalk was enormous and towered up into the clouds. Curious, Jack decided to climb the beanstalk to see where it led. Jack began climbing cautiously. The higher he went, the more amazed he became by what he saw. The branches were thick and strong, making it easier for him to climb. After a long climb, Jack reached the top of the beanstalk and found himself in a strange land filled with clouds and fresh, crisp air. In this land, everything was gigantic compared to Jack. The flowers were larger, the grass was taller, and even the birds were unusually big. As Jack explored this peculiar land, he noticed a huge castle in the distance. The castle was tall and imposing. Jack decided to approach it cautiously. When he reached the castle, he found the door slightly ajar and slipped inside. Inside the castle, Jack discovered a large room filled with piles of gold and precious gems. Suddenly, he heard loud footsteps approaching. Fee-fi-fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman, boomed a thunderous voice. Jack quickly hid behind a large pot and saw a giant enter the room. The giant was enormous, with long hair and protruding teeth. He looked around suspiciously but did not see Jack, so he sat down on his enormous chair and began counting his gold. As Jack hid, a small, glowing fairy appeared next to him. She whispered, "Don't be afraid, Jack. I'm here to help you. This giant has stolen the gold from your family and many others. You must take the gold and return it." Jack felt braver thanks to the fairy's words. He waited until the giant fell asleep, then began to gather gold into his bag. Suddenly, the giant woke up and started chasing Jack around the castle. Jack ran as fast as he could, with the fairy guiding him to the exit. Jack hurried out of the castle and headed toward the giant beanstalk. He began descending quickly, carrying the gold. But the giant was right behind him, and his footsteps shook the beanstalk. As Jack climbed down quickly, the fairy helped by moving the branches to slow the giant. Jack reached the ground safely and immediately started chopping down the beanstalk with an axe. As the giant reached the middle of the beanstalk, it broke and the giant fell. After the giant fell, the fairy reappeared and smiled at Jack. "You did a great job, Jack, but there's something else you need to know. In the castle, there is a hen that lays golden eggs. You must go back and bring it to ensure your family's prosperity." Once upon a time, in a small village far away, there lived a kind and gentle couple who had always wished for a child. After many years, the wife finally became pregnant. Their house was next to a high wall that enclosed a beautiful garden filled with the most exquisite flowers and herbs. However, this garden belonged to a wicked witch named Hare, and no one dared to enter it. One day, the wife, who was now expecting a baby, had a strange craving for a particular herb called Rapunzel that grew only in Gothel's garden. Her desire for the herb grew so strong that she became ill. Her husband, desperate to save his wife, decided to sneak into the garden at night to gather some Rapunzel for her. He successfully collected the herb and brought it back to his wife. She made a salad from it and felt better immediately. But her craving only increased, and she begged her husband to get more. The husband, once again, sneaked into the garden at night. However, this time, Hare caught him. "How dare you steal from my garden?" she shouted. Terrified, the husband explained his wife's cravings and pleaded for mercy. Hare softened and made a deal with him. "You can take as much Rapunzel as you need, but in return, you must give me your child when it is born." The man, in his desperation, agreed to the terrible bargain. When the baby girl was born, Hare appeared, named her Rapunzel, and took her away. Hare took Rapunzel to a hidden tower deep in the forest. The tower had neither stairs nor doors, only a single window at the very top. As Rapunzel grew, her golden hair grew incredibly long. Hare would visit her by standing at the base of the tower and calling out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel would then drop her long, golden hair out of the window, and Hare would climb up. In the tower, Rapunzel had no one to talk to except Hare, and she spent her days alone, singing and dreaming of the outside world. Rapunzel's beautiful voice echoed through the forest, attracting birds and animals. One day, a prince who was riding through the forest heard Rapunzel's enchanting song. He followed the sound until he found the tower. He saw Hare climb up Rapunzel's hair and understood how to reach her. The next day, after Hare left, the prince stood at the base of the tower and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel, thinking it was Hare, lowered her hair, and the prince climbed up. When he reached the top, Rapunzel was frightened at first but soon realized that the prince meant her no harm. He told her how he had been captivated by her singing and had come to see her. They talked for hours, and the prince visited her every day. The prince and Rapunzel fell in love and devised a plan for her escape. The prince brought Rapunzel a piece of silk every time he visited, so she could weave a ladder strong enough to climb down. However, one day, Gothel discovered the prince with Rapunzel. Furious, she cut off Rapunzel's long hair and cast a spell, banishing Rapunzel to a desolate desert far away. She then waited for the prince, who called out as usual. Gothel let down the cut hair, and when the prince climbed up, he was shocked to find Gothel instead of Rapunzel. Gothel, in her rage, pushed the prince from the tower. He fell into a thorn bush, which blinded him. The prince wandered the forest blindly, heartbroken, and searching for Rapunzel. Meanwhile, Rapunzel lived a lonely life in the desert. She gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. One day, while singing to her children, the prince heard her voice and followed the sound. Rapunzel recognized him immediately. She ran to him and held him tightly. Her tears of joy fell into his eyes, and miraculously, his sight was restored. In a quaint village nestled between rolling hills and lush meadows, there lived a young shepherd named Tom. Tom had the important job of tending to a flock of sheep that roamed freely in the verdant pastures. Every morning, Tom would lead the sheep out of their pen and into the fields, ensuring they had enough food and water throughout the day. Though Tom was responsible and kind-hearted, he often found his days monotonous. The routine of guiding the sheep and watching them graze became increasingly dull for him. To break the boredom, Tom devised a plan to entertain himself and catch the villagers' attention. One sunny afternoon, with nothing but the gentle bleating of sheep to keep him company, Tom decided to cry out for help. "Wolf! Wolf! A wolf is attacking the sheep!" His voice rang across the meadow, filled with urgency and fear. The villagers, who were busy with their own tasks, quickly gathered their pitchforks and tools and rushed to Tom's aid. When they arrived, breathless and ready for a fight, they found Tom laughing uncontrollably. There was no wolf in sight, only the sheep grazing peacefully. The villagers were annoyed, realizing they had been tricked, and scolded Tom for wasting their time. Despite their irritation, they went back to their chores, leaving Tom to his amusement. Tom's trick had been successful in drawing attention, and he enjoyed the reaction he had received. A few days later, feeling the same sense of boredom, Tom decided to repeat his trick. Again, he shouted, "Wolf! Wolf!" with exaggerated fear in his voice. The villagers, remembering the previous incident, were reluctant but still worried about the safety of the sheep. They hurried to the meadow, only to find Tom once more laughing at their expense. The sheep were unharmed, and Tom's deceit had only angered the villagers further. They warned him sternly not to cry wolf again, but Tom, undeterred, promised to be more careful. Days passed, and one chilly evening, as the sun began to set behind the hills, Tom spotted something unusual. A large, menacing wolf emerged from the edge of the forest, its eyes gleaming with hunger as it stalked the flock. Tom's heart pounded with fear. He knew this was no ordinary false alarm, it was a real threat. Tom's fear was mixed with desperation. He remembered how his previous lies had made the villagers distrustful. Should he call for help, or would they simply dismiss his plea as another prank? Torn between fear and guilt, Tom decided to call for help anyway, hoping the villagers would come in time. Tom ran to the village, shouting with all his might, "Wolf! Wolf! Please help me, there's a real wolf attacking the sheep." His voice was filled with genuine terror, but the villagers, still recalling his past deceit, were hesitant. They suspected it might be another false alarm and were reluctant to leave their tasks. By the time they finally decided to investigate, the wolf had already begun attacking the sheep. The damage was significant, several sheep were injured or missing. Tom watched in horror and regret as the wolf disappeared back into the forest, leaving behind a scene of chaos. When the villagers arrived, they were shocked and dismayed to find the aftermath of the wolf's attack. The once peaceful meadow was now strewn with broken branches and frightened sheep. The villagers were heartbroken over the loss and damage, and their disappointment in Tom was palpable. In a distant, prosperous kingdom, there lived an emperor who was obsessed with clothes. He adored fashionable attire and spent all his time trying on the latest designs. His wardrobe was filled with the most exquisite garments, and he constantly sought out the finest tailors and designers to create new outfits for him. The emperor's vanity knew no bounds, and he cared more about his appearance than the well-being of his kingdom. The people of the kingdom admired the emperor's clothes and were eager to flatter him. They marveled at his wardrobe and praised every new outfit, even though they secretly knew that their emperor's obsession with clothing was a bit excessive. One day, two swindlers arrived in the kingdom. They were clever con artists named Hare and Lars, known for their deceitful tricks and cunning ways. Hare and Lars claimed to be master weavers who could create the most magnificent fabric ever seen, so magnificent that it was invisible to anyone who was unfit for their position or not worthy. The emperor, always eager for something new and extravagant, was intrigued by the swindlers' promises. They claimed that their fabric was not only beautiful but also imbued with magical properties. The emperor, desperate to be seen as the wisest and most discerning ruler, immediately hired them and provided them with gold and silk to get started. Hare and Lars set up their workshop in a grand palace room, but in reality, there was no fabric or materials at all. They pretended to work diligently, weaving imaginary threads and cutting non-existent cloth. The emperor, anxious to see the progress, visited their workshop frequently, but the swindlers always showed him empty looms and pretended to work on intricate patterns. Each time, Hare and Lars insisted that their creation was coming along beautifully and that the emperor would soon see the results. They convinced him that only those with the finest qualities could truly see the fabric. The emperor, afraid of being perceived as unworthy, praised the invisible garments enthusiastically and eagerly anticipated their completion. After a considerable amount of time, the swindlers declared that the garments were finished and ready for the emperor to wear. They pretended to dress him in the new clothes, which were nothing more than his regular undergarments. The emperor, not wanting to admit he saw nothing, pretended to be amazed by the beautiful and elegant garments. The swindlers also persuaded the emperor to hold a grand parade to display his new clothes to the entire kingdom. The emperor was thrilled at the thought of showing off his magnificent new outfit and giving the people something to admire. The day of the parade arrived, and the streets were lined with citizens eager to see the emperor's new clothes. Once upon a time, in a beautiful kingdom, there lived a queen who had 3 daughters. The youngest daughter was the most beautiful and kind-hearted of them all. One day, the young princess was playing near a well in the royal garden with her favorite golden ball. She accidentally dropped the ball into the deep well and began to cry. A frog appeared from the well and asked, "Why are you crying, dear princess?" The princess replied, "I have lost my golden ball in the well, and I cannot retrieve it." The frog said, "I will fetch your ball if you promise to be my friend and take me with you to the palace." Without much thought, the princess agreed to the frog's request. The frog dived into the well and returned with the golden ball. The princess took the ball and ran back to the palace, forgetting her promise. That evening, while the royal family was dining in the grand hall, they heard a knock on the door. The princess opened the door to find the frog. The frog said, "You promised to take me to the palace and be my friend." Feeling ashamed, the princess told her father, the king, about her promise. The king, being just and wise, insisted that the princess keep her word. Reluctantly, the princess let the frog into the palace. The frog sat at the table and asked the princess to feed him. Though disgusted, she obeyed. After dinner, the frog asked to be taken to the princess's room. She was horrified at the idea, but the king reminded her of her promise. She carried the frog to her room and placed him on a soft cushion next to her bed. That night, the princess cried herself to sleep, feeling sorry for herself and for the frog. In the middle of the night, something magical happened. The frog transformed into a handsome prince. The next morning, the princess woke up to find the handsome prince beside her. The prince explained that he had been cursed by an evil witch and transformed into a frog. Only a promise kept by a kind-hearted princess could break the spell. He said, "Because you kept your promise, you freed me from the curse. I am the prince of a faraway kingdom, and I wish for you to come with me and be my princess." The princess happily agreed. When the king and queen heard the story, they gave their blessings for the marriage. The prince and the princess were married in a grand ceremony. The whole kingdom celebrated their union. The princess finally experienced the joy and adventure she had longed for. They ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, and their family prospered. After their marriage, the prince and princess became king and queen of the prince's kingdom. They ruled with justice and mercy and were beloved by their people. In a quaint village nestled between rolling green hills, lived a kind farmer named Fritz with his wife and 3 children. Their life was modest but filled with love and hard work. Each of the farmer's children had their own dreams and interests. Hans, the eldest, wanted to become wealthy, Friedrich, the second son, loved books and learning, and the youngest, Johann, adored animals. One sunny day, while working in his fields, Fritz stumbled upon an old cage buried under a tree. When he opened the cage, he discovered a golden goose shimmering with golden feathers. Amazed by this find, Fritz took the golden goose home to show his family. The children were astonished by the golden goose. Johann, the youngest, decided to take care of the goose and make it part of his daily routine. Soon, Johann noticed something extraordinary. Each morning, the golden goose laid golden eggs that sparkled like stars. Hans and Friedrich saw the golden goose as a chance to achieve wealth. They planned to sell it at the market to make a fortune. Johann, however, was reluctant to part with the goose because he loved it dearly and wanted to keep it. One morning, Hans and Friedrich took the golden goose to the market. The market was bustling with people, and they tried to convince buyers that the golden goose was worth a lot of money. However, the townsfolk were skeptical and doubted the truth of the golden goose. They failed to sell it. Disappointed, Hans and Friedrich returned home. Determined to find another way to profit from the golden goose, they decided to seek out a famous sorcerer who lived in the nearby forest, hoping he could help them exploit the goose's abilities. Deep in the forest, Hans and Friedrich found the sorcerer's dilapidated cottage. The sorcerer, known for his magical powers and wicked nature, agreed to help them, but he demanded that they bring him specific magical ingredients. Eager to make use of the golden goose, Hans and Friedrich complied and brought the ingredients to the sorcerer. However, the sorcerer had sinister plans and intended to use the golden goose for his own dark purposes. That night, while Fritz and his family were asleep, the sorcerer sneaked into their home and kidnapped the golden goose. He took it to his dark, enchanted castle, surrounded by magical minions, with plans to use it for his malevolent schemes. When Johann discovered that the golden goose was missing, he was heartbroken and angry. Determined to rescue the goose, Johann gathered his courage and set out on a journey to find the sorcerer. Johann ventured into the dark, foreboding forest, where twisted trees and winding paths made the journey difficult. Despite the challenges, Johann pressed on until he discovered the sorcerer's castle. Arriving at the sorcerer's castle, Johann encountered many magical minions. Using his cleverness and bravery, he managed to bypass the guards and find the room where the golden goose was kept. The goose was imprisoned in a magical cage. Johann faced the sorcerer in a fierce magical duel. The sorcerer used all his tricks to defeat Johann, but with his bravery and love for the golden goose, Johann ultimately overcame the sorcerer and broke the spell.
In a faraway kingdom, King Stefan and Queen Leah were blessed with a beautiful daughter named Aurora. The entire kingdom rejoiced, and a grand celebration was held to welcome the newborn princess. Nobles, fairies, and subjects from all corners of the land gathered to offer their blessings and gifts. 3 good fairies, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather, bestowed their magical gifts upon Aurora. Flora granted her beauty, Fauna gave her the gift of song, and Merryweather was about to give her gift when the celebration was interrupted by Maleficent, a wicked fairy who had not been invited. Furious at being excluded, Maleficent cast a dreadful curse upon the princess. Before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she will prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die. The entire hall gasped in horror. However, Merryweather still had her gift to give. She couldn't reverse the curse, but she could soften it. Aurora will not die, she declared. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep, only to be awakened by true love's kiss. To protect Aurora, King Stephen ordered all spinning wheels in the kingdom to be burned. The good fairies took Aurora into hiding, raising her in a secluded woodland cottage as a peasant girl named Briar Rose. The fairies used their magic sparingly and taught Aurora to be kind, graceful, and wise. Aurora grew into a beautiful young woman, unaware of her royal heritage. She spent her days singing with the birds and befriending the forest animals, content in her simple life. However, her destiny was about to unfold. On the day of her 16th birthday, Aurora ventured deeper into the forest, singing a sweet melody. Prince Philip, a young and gallant prince who was passing by, heard her enchanting voice and followed it. When they met, they felt an instant connection, unaware of their true identities. Aurora and Philip spent the afternoon together, sharing dreams and laughter. They agreed to meet again, and Aurora returned to the cottage, excited to tell her guardians about the charming stranger she had met. Back at the cottage, the fairies revealed Aurora's true identity and the curse that hung over her. Heartbroken that she could not see Prince Philip again, Aurora reluctantly accepted her fate. The fairies took her to the castle to reunite with her parents and to prepare for her upcoming 16th birthday celebration. Despite the precautions, Maleficent's curse was powerful. On the evening of her birthday, Aurora was lured to a hidden tower by a mysterious voice. There she found a spinning wheel and, as if in a trance, pricked her finger on the spindle. Instantly, she fell into a deep sleep. The kingdom mourned as the fairies placed Aurora on a bed of roses in the highest tower, hoping for the day when true love's kiss would break the curse. They cast a spell over the entire kingdom, causing everyone to fall asleep until the princess awoke. Meanwhile, Prince Philip, who had discovered Aurora's true identity, was determined to save her. However, Maleficent captured him and imprisoned him in her dark, foreboding castle. With the help of the good fairies, Philip escaped and armed himself with the shield of virtue and the sword of truth. Philip bravely battled through Maleficent's minions and thorny forests to reach Aurora. In a final desperate attempt to stop him, Maleficent transformed into a fearsome dragon. A fierce battle ensued, and with the fairies' help, Philip defeated the dragon by plunging the sword of truth into its heart. With Maleficent defeated, Philip made his way to the tower where Aurora lay in a deep sleep. He gently kissed her and the curse was broken. Aurora awoke, and the kingdom stirred from its slumber. The royal family was joyously reunited, and the kingdom celebrated the end of the dark curse. Prince Philip and Princess Aurora were married in a grand celebration. The entire kingdom rejoiced, and the fairies blessed their union. Peace and happiness returned to the land, and the story of the brave prince and the sleeping princess became a legend passed down through generations. As Prince Philip and Princess Aurora began their life together, they faced the challenges of ruling a kingdom. In a bustling city where the streets were lined with shops and the air was filled with the chatter of busy people, lived a poor little girl named Anna. Anna was known to the townspeople as the Little Match Girl. On New Year's Eve, as the city buzzed with excitement for the upcoming celebrations, Anna roamed the streets with a small basket of matches, hoping to sell them to passers-by. The weather was bitterly cold, with snowflakes gently falling from the sky and covering the ground in a thick white blanket. Anna was dressed in ragged clothes and her feet were bare, her tiny toes turning blue from the cold. She clutched her basket tightly, shivering with every step she took. As Anna wandered through the streets, she looked longingly into the windows of the homes she passed. Inside, families were gathered around warm fireplaces, laughing and sharing festive meals. The aroma of roasted meats and sweet desserts filled the air, making Anna's stomach growl with hunger. Despite the cold and her empty stomach, Anna kept walking, calling out to anyone who would listen. Matches. Would you like to buy some matches? But the people were too busy with their own lives to notice the poor little girl. Some simply ignored her, while others brushed past her without a second glance. Anna found a small corner between two buildings where she could seek some shelter from the biting wind. She huddled there, pulling her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. As she sat there, she couldn't help but think of her family. She remembered the happier times when her parents were still alive, and they celebrated New Year's Eve together. Her father would light a fire in the hearth, and her mother would cook a delicious meal. They would sit around the table, laughing and telling stories, their home filled with warmth and love. But those days were gone, and now Anna was alone, left to fend for herself on the cold streets. In her desperate attempt to stay warm, Anna decided to light one of her matches. She struck the match against the wall, and a small flame flickered to life. She held the match close, feeling the warmth spread through her cold fingers. In the glow of the match, she saw a vision of a warm, cozy room with a crackling fire in the fireplace. For a brief moment, Anna felt like she was back home with her family, surrounded by warmth and love. But the match quickly burned out, and the vision faded away, leaving her in the cold darkness once more. Determined to feel that warmth again, Anna struck another match. This time she saw a table laden with a feast fit for a king. There were roasted meats, steaming vegetables, and sweet pastries. Her mouth watered at the sight, and she reached out to touch the food, but the match burned out before she could feel the texture of the food. The cold reality returned, and Anna's stomach growled louder than ever. She clutched her basket of matches, her hope dwindling with each passing moment. Anna lit another match, and this time she saw a beautiful Christmas tree decorated with twinkling lights and colorful ornaments. At the top of the tree was a shining star, and beneath it were piles of presents wrapped in bright paper and ribbons. Anna's heart ached with longing as she gazed at the tree, wishing she could be a part of the joyous scene. But as the match burned out, the tree and the presents disappeared, leaving Anna in the cold, empty street. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to give up hope. With trembling hands, Anna struck another match. In the flickering light, she saw her grandmother, the only person who had ever truly cared for her. Her grandmother's face was kind and loving, her eyes filled with warmth and compassion. Anna felt a surge of love and comfort wash over her as she looked into her grandmother's eyes. "Grandmother!" Anna cried out, reaching for the vision. "Please take me with you."
In a vibrant and lively forest, lived a proud rabbit named Rudy. Rudy was renowned for his incredible speed and would often boast about his swiftness to the other animals. He loved racing through the forest, always leaving other animals far behind. Rudy's confidence in his speed made him quite arrogant, and he frequently laughed at the slower animals. One sunny afternoon, Rudy encountered a serene and steady tortoise named Sally. As they crossed paths, Sally said with a gentle smile, "Hello, Rudy. I hear you're the fastest animal in the forest. How about a race to see if you're as fast as everyone says?" Rudy burst into laughter. "You, a tortoise, challenging me to a race? You're so slow, this will be over before you even take a few steps," he said with a mocking tone. Sally, although aware of her slow pace, was determined to take on the challenge. "Why not? It will be fun, and maybe I can surprise you," she replied calmly. Rudy, amused and confident of his victory, agreed to the race. Word of the challenge spread quickly through the forest, and soon a crowd of animals gathered to watch the spectacle. The race was set to start from the big oak tree and end at the old mill, a considerable distance away. As the animals gathered and cheered, Rudy stretched and prepared for the race, while Sally took her place at the starting line with a steady and determined look. With a loud shout, the race began. Rudy leaped forward with incredible speed, his legs moving like a blur. He raced ahead, leaving Sally far behind. Rudy was so fast that he quickly reached the halfway point and decided to take a break. Seeing that Sally was still far back, Rudy figured he had plenty of time. He found a soft patch of grass under a shady tree and decided to nap. "I'm so far ahead, there's no way Sally can catch up," I'll just take a quick nap, he thought as he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Meanwhile, Sally continued her slow and steady progress. Despite the slow pace, she was persistent and focused on the finish line. Sally knew that the race wasn't just about speed, it was also about determination and perseverance. She moved steadily, making sure not to rush or tire herself out. As the sun moved across the sky, Sally kept her eyes on the prize. Her steady pace allowed her to maintain her energy, and she made progress step by step, inching closer to the finish line with each passing moment. After a long nap, Rudy woke up feeling refreshed and confident. He looked around and saw no sign of Sally. I guess I have plenty of time to finish the race, he said to himself, stretching his legs. When Rudy got up and started running again, he was shocked to see Sally approaching the finish line. Panic set in as he realized he had been sleeping on the job. Rudy sprinted as fast as he could, but his earlier nap had made him lag behind. Sally, with her steady and consistent pace, reached the finish line just as Rudy was closing in. The animals gathered at the old mill cheered as they saw Sally crossing the finish line first. Rudy arrived moments later, breathless and astonished. Sally looked at Rudy with a gentle smile and said, "Sometimes, being steady and persistent can win the race, even against those who are faster." Rudy, feeling both humbled and embarrassed, approached Sally. "I must admit, Sally, I was wrong. I thought my speed was unbeatable, but I've learned that persistence and patience can be just as important. I'm sorry for underestimating you." Sally nodded graciously. "Thank you, Rudy. It's not just about being fast. It's about staying focused and not giving up." The forest animals celebrated Sally's victory and praised her for her perseverance. Rudy realized the value of humility and the importance of respecting others, no matter their pace. In a peaceful forest, a family of goats lived happily together. The family consisted of a kind mother goat and her 7 playful kids. The mother goat adored her children and took great care of them. Every day, she reminded them of the dangers that lurked in the forest, particularly the wicked wolf who was always on the lookout for a tasty meal. She stressed the importance of staying inside and never opening the door to strangers. The 7 little goats enjoyed their days filled with laughter and games. They explored the beautiful meadows, played in the fields, and had delicious meals. They always looked forward to their mother's return and cherished their time together. One bright morning, the mother goat went out to buy some groceries for the family. She left her 7 kids in the house with strict instructions not to open the door for anyone. The wicked wolf, who had been lurking in the shadows, saw the mother goat leave and saw an opportunity to hatch his plan. The wolf approached the house, his stomach growling with hunger. He knocked on the door softly and said in a fake, sweet voice, "Children, it's your mother. I've brought you some delicious treats." The 7 little goats, knowing their mother's voice well, immediately recognized the deception. They refused to open the door, and the wolf, frustrated, slunk away. Not willing to give up, the wolf devised a new plan. He went to a nearby shop and bought some white paint and a disguise. He carefully painted his fur to look more like their mother's color and dressed in a costume that resembled the mother goat's clothes. With his new look and voice, the wolf was confident he could trick the kids. He returned to the house and knocked on the door again. This time, he spoke with a gentle and familiar tone, "Children, it's your mother. Open the door, I have something special for you." The 7 little goats, believing it was indeed their mother, opened the door wide without suspecting a thing. As soon as the door was open, the wolf slipped inside the house. He started searching for the 7 little goats, pretending to be their mother. The kids were initially excited to see their mother but soon grew suspicious of some unusual behavior. They quickly realized that something was wrong and began to hide. One by one, the goats scrambled to find safe places. Some hid behind curtains, others in cupboards, and a few under the beds. The wolf, unaware of their hiding spots, continued to search the house, thinking he had successfully deceived the kids. The 7 little goats, realizing that the wolf was getting closer to finding them, decided it was time to execute their escape plan. They gathered their courage and coordinated their movements. With one synchronized leap, they ran out of their hiding spots and dashed into the garden. They raced towards a nearby river, leaping over stones and ducking under branches. The wolf, hearing their commotion, followed them to the riverbank but found it difficult to track their movements through the dense foliage and muddy water. The wolf, now at the river, grew increasingly frustrated. He waded through the water, searching for the goats, but the muddy river and the strong current made it nearly impossible. He splashed around, trying to catch sight of the goats, but they were well hidden among the rocks and tall grasses. As time passed and the wolf's frustration mounted, he finally gave up. Exhausted and defeated, he left the riverbank, grumbling about his failed attempt to catch the goats. Once the wolf was gone, the 7 little goats emerged from their hiding places. In a far-off land, there was a beautiful kingdom called Eldoria. The kingdom thrived under the rule of King Hare and Queen Ilara. However, a dark curse fell upon the land, causing the crops to wither, rivers to dry up, and the skies to turn a gloomy gray. The once vibrant kingdom was now shrouded in despair. The only hope for salvation lay in the legend of the Golden Bird, a magical creature said to possess the power to lift the curse and restore the land to its former glory. King Eric, desperate to save his kingdom, summoned the kingdom's wise old sage, Master Elric. The sage revealed an ancient prophecy inscribed on a forgotten scroll. To lift the curse that plagues Eldoria, a courageous soul must seek the Golden Bird. The bird resides in a distant and enchanted land, protected by magical trials and fierce guardians. Determined to save his kingdom, Prince Leo, the king's eldest son, stepped forward. Though young, Leo was known for his bravery and kindness. He vowed to embark on the quest to find the Golden Bird. With the blessing of his parents and the sage's guidance, Leo prepared for his journey. He equipped himself with a magical map, a sword forged from enchanted steel, and a protective amulet that the sage had bestowed upon him. At dawn, Leo set off on his journey, accompanied by his loyal horse, Thunder, and his clever companion, Felix the fox. They ventured through rolling hills and dense forests, leaving the familiar comforts of the kingdom behind. As they traveled, Leo and Felix forged a deep bond, relying on each other's strengths to navigate the challenges that lay ahead. Their path led them to the enchanted forest, a place of mesmerizing beauty and hidden dangers. The forest was alive with vibrant flora, but it was also home to magical beings and tricky enchantments. The trees whispered secrets, and the air sparkled with fairy dust. As they delved deeper, they encountered a mischievous band of fairies. One of the forest's greatest obstacles was the River of Illusions, a wide, fast-flowing river that distorted reality. The river's surface shimmered with illusions, creating false paths and confusing reflections. Leo used his magical map to find the true path, carefully guiding Thunder across the treacherous waters. Felix's sharp eyes helped them avoid the deceptive illusions that threatened to lead them astray. After crossing the river, Leo and Felix arrived at the Cave of Shadows. The cave was a labyrinth of darkness and echoes, where shadowy figures tried to mislead and frighten them. Leo's amulet glowed brightly, dispelling the shadows and revealing the true path. Using his courage and quick thinking, Leo navigated through the cave, emerging unscathed and ready for the next challenge. As they left the cave, they faced the towering mountain of the dragon. The mountain's peak was shrouded in storm clouds, and the path was steep and perilous. At the summit lay the dragon's lair, where the Golden Bird was said to reside. Leo and Felix climbed the mountain, braving fierce winds and rocky terrain. When they reached the top, they were confronted by a formidable dragon with scales like molten gold. The dragon, named Draconis, was a majestic but fearsome guardian of the Golden Bird. It roared and blocked their path. Leo, with great bravery, approached Draconis and explained his quest. The dragon, impressed by Leo's determination and honesty, agreed to let them pass on one condition: Leo must answer a riddle. In a quaint coastal village, lived an old fisherman named Ali. Ali was a kind-hearted man who worked diligently each day, casting his nets into the sea to catch fish. Despite his hard work, he and his wife, Fatima, lived modestly in a small, weathered cottage. They were known throughout the village for their generosity and willingness to help others in need. One serene morning, while Ali was fishing in his small boat, he felt an unusual weight pulling on his net. Curious and hopeful, he tugged at the net with all his strength. To his amazement, he pulled up a shimmering golden fish. The fish's scales glittered like precious gems, and its eyes sparkled with an ethereal light. As Ali marveled at his catch, the fish spoke in a melodious voice, "Please, kind fisherman, release me, and I will grant you 3 wishes." Ali, though astonished, was a man of integrity. He looked at the golden fish and saw the sincerity in its eyes. "If you can truly grant wishes," he said, "then I will release you." With a gentle hand, Ali set the golden fish back into the sea. The fish swam in circles before disappearing into the deep blue waters, leaving a trail of sparkling bubbles. That evening, Ali and Fatima discussed their good fortune. They decided to make their first wish, a new house. Their old cottage was falling apart. They longed for a place that was more comfortable and secure. The next morning, Ali went to the shore and called out to the golden fish. As he spoke his wish, the waters shimmered, and the fish appeared briefly, nodding in acknowledgement before vanishing. When Ali and Fatima returned home, they were amazed to find that their old cottage had been transformed into a beautiful, spacious house. It was built with strong materials, adorned with colorful flowers, and surrounded by a well-kept garden. The couple was overjoyed and grateful, marveling at their new home and thanking the golden fish for its generosity. As weeks passed, Fatima began to worry about their financial situation. Although they had a lovely home, they still struggled to make ends meet. "Ali," she said one evening, "we need more money to live comfortably. Let us ask the golden fish for wealth." Reluctantly, Ali agreed and once again went to the shore to call upon the golden fish. The golden fish appeared and listened to Ali's second wish. With a flash of light, the fish granted the wish, and when Ali returned home, he found their house filled with gold coins, jewels, and fine clothing. The couple was thrilled with their newfound wealth. They enjoyed luxuries they had never imagined. They were admired by their neighbors. Over time, Fatima's ambitions grew. She wished for even greater power and influence. "Ali," she said, "we have wealth, but I want more. Let us wish for a grand palace and for you to become a king." Ali was hesitant but agreed, hoping to make Fatima happy. He went to the shore and made the third wish to the golden fish. The golden fish granted the third wish, and in an instant, their home was replaced with a magnificent palace. The palace was adorned with golden towers, marble floors, and lush gardens. Ali was dressed in royal robes and crowned as king. Fatima, now a queen, enjoyed the finest luxuries and commanded great respect. As the days went by, Ali and Fatima became increasingly isolated. They were surrounded by servants and courtiers, and their once simple lives were overshadowed by their newfound power. They felt a growing sense of emptiness despite their grandeur. The villagers, once their friends, now envied and resented them. One day, Ali walked through the palace gardens, reflecting on their life. He missed the simplicity and happiness of their previous life. He realized that their wishes had led them to a life of loneliness and dissatisfaction. With a heavy heart, he decided to seek out the golden fish for guidance. Ali called out to the golden fish, expressing his regret and desire to return to their former life. The fish appeared and listened to Ali's sorrowful tale. It gently advised him that true happiness is not found in material wealth or power but in the simple joys and genuine connections with others.
In a quaint village nestled between rolling hills and verdant fields, lived a young milkmaid named Patty. Patty was known throughout the village for her sweet nature and hardworking spirit. Every morning she would rise with the sun, milk the family's cows, and set off to the market with a large pail of fresh milk balanced perfectly on her head. Her family depended on the income from the milk, and Patty took her responsibilities very seriously. One bright morning, Patty set off for the market as usual. As she walked along the path, she couldn't help but let her mind wander to the possibilities of what she could do with the money from selling her milk. The weather was perfect and the birds were singing. She felt as if the day itself was promising her something wonderful. Her thoughts started to drift into a daydream as she walked along the sunny path. With every step she took, Patty's daydreams grew more vivid. I'll sell this milk, she thought, and with the money I'll buy some eggs. From those eggs I'll raise chickens. Soon, I'll have so many chickens that I can sell their eggs at the market too. She could see herself with baskets full of eggs, becoming the village's most successful egg seller. The image of herself with a prosperous egg business made her heart swell with pride. As Patty continued her journey, her dreams expanded. With the money from the eggs I'll buy a pig. I'll feed the pig well so that it grows big and strong. Once it's fully grown, I'll sell it for a good price. Her imagination took her to a future where she was a respected and wealthy farmer, admired by all her neighbors. She pictured herself with a healthy pig, the pride of the village, bringing her even more wealth. Her dreams didn't stop there. Then with the money from the pig I'll buy a cow. And not just any cow, a beautiful cow that will give the richest milk in the village. I'll sell the milk and become even wealthier. Patty envisioned herself living in a grand house with a beautiful garden, wearing fine clothes and never having to worry about money again. She saw herself surrounded by prosperity and success, admired by all. By now, Patty was completely absorbed in her fantasies. With all my wealth, I'll buy a cart and a horse to pull it. I'll deliver milk, eggs, and cheese to all the villages around. I'll be famous for my fine products, and everyone will want to buy from me. She imagined herself driving a splendid cart, with people waving and cheering as she passed by. The thought of becoming a well-known and successful businesswoman filled her with excitement. As she neared the market, Patty's excitement grew. She could almost feel the coins in her hand and see her dreams coming true. Lost in her thoughts, she failed to notice a small stone on the path. She tripped, and in an instant, the pail of milk toppled from her head, spilling its contents all over the ground. Patty stared in disbelief at the pool of milk spreading on the path, her dreams vanishing with it. Patty stared in disbelief at the pool of milk spreading on the path. All her dreams and plans seemed to vanish with the spilled milk. She felt a wave of disappointment wash over her, as she realized that her fantasies had been built on something as fragile as a pail of milk. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She couldn't let herself be defeated by this setback. With a heavy heart, Patty picked up her empty pail and sat by the roadside.
In the grand kingdom of Aurora, ruled King Harold, known for his wisdom and fairness. His castle, a marvel of stone and grandeur, overlooked a vibrant land where people lived in peace and prosperity. Yet, beneath the kingdom's surface, there was an unspoken disparity. In the crowded marketplace lived a humble beggar named Tom, who, despite his meager means, was admired for his generosity and kindness. King Harold, curious about the daily lives of his people, decided to disguise himself as a commoner. Wearing simple clothes and a worn hat, he mingled with the townsfolk, hoping to understand their true struggles and joys. During his wanderings, he encountered Tom, who was distributing bread to other less fortunate individuals. Moved by Tom's selflessness, the king struck up a conversation with him, unaware that Tom was not just a beggar but a symbol of the kingdom's heart. As the day wore on, Harold and Tom shared their dreams and frustrations. Tom expressed a desire for a better life, while Harold spoke of the burdens of kingship. Their heartfelt conversation attracted the attention of an old sorcerer who had been eavesdropping. The sorcerer, recognizing the depth of their desires, proposed a magical solution. A chance for them to switch roles and experience each other's lives. In a flash of magical light, Tom and King Harold found themselves in each other's shoes. Tom was suddenly in the opulent throne room, surrounded by regal attire and endless luxuries. While Harold was thrust into the crowded marketplace, dressed in rags. The sorcerer's spell had granted them the opportunity to understand and appreciate each other's lives from a new perspective. Tom, now King Harold, was awestruck by the grandeur of the castle. Initially, he reveled in the luxury and attention, but it soon became apparent that ruling a kingdom was no simple task. Tom struggled with official duties, from attending council meetings to making complex decisions that affected the lives of his people. He found the responsibilities overwhelming and often felt isolated in the grand yet impersonal castle. King Harold, now in Tom's world, faced the harsh realities of life as a beggar. He experienced the biting cold of winter nights, the hunger of an empty stomach, and the challenges of finding shelter. Despite his royal upbringing, Harold struggled to navigate the complexities of street life. Through his experiences, he came to understand the resilience and camaraderie that defined the lives of the less fortunate. Tom faced several challenges in his new role. He made mistakes in judgment, such as mismanaging resources and failing to address the needs of his subjects effectively. The courtiers were skeptical and often took advantage of his inexperience. Tom learned that leadership required not only authority but also empathy, understanding, and the ability to listen to the people. Harold, on the other hand, encountered the difficulties of living without privilege. He faced prejudice and suspicion from others, struggled to find enough food, and learned the value of community support. Harold discovered the strength and kindness that people like Tom embodied, which had been hidden beneath his royal veneer. As time passed, both Tom and Harold began to appreciate the depth of their respective challenges. Tom, despite his efforts, could not match the intricate demands of ruling a kingdom. He realized that true leadership required more than just making decisions, it required understanding the impact of those decisions on the lives of ordinary people. Harold, through his trials, developed a deep empathy for the struggles faced by those in poverty. He saw firsthand the importance of compassion and the strength found in community bonds. His experiences gave him a new perspective on what it meant to be a leader and a citizen. The sorcerer returned to observe how Tom and Harold had adapted to their new roles. Seeing their growth and the wisdom they had gained, the sorcerer decided it was time to reverse the transformation. With another wave of his wand, Tom and Harold were restored to their original positions.
In the heart of a flourishing kingdom, Queen Isabella was renowned for her extraordinary beauty. She owned a magical mirror that spoke only the truth. Each day she asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." But as Snow White grew older, the mirror's answer changed to, "Snow White is the fairest of them all." Consumed by jealousy, Queen Isabella's heart hardened, and she plotted to eliminate Snow White once and for all. Unable to bear the thought of Snow White surpassing her beauty, Queen Isabella summoned her huntsman. She ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest and leave her there to perish. The huntsman, though reluctant, followed the queen's orders. He led Snow White into the heart of the forest, where the trees seemed to whisper ominous warnings. As evening approached, Snow White found herself lost and disoriented. The forest was dark and foreboding, but she stumbled upon a quaint hidden cottage. Exhausted and frightened, she entered the cottage, hoping to find some comfort. Inside, she discovered a cozy yet modest home with 7 tiny beds, each meticulously made. Overcome by fatigue, she lay down on one of the beds and fell into a deep sleep. The 7 dwarfs, Doc, Grumpy, Sleepy, Bashful, Happy, Dopey, and Sneezy, returned home from their day's work in the mines. They were startled to find their cottage in disarray, with Snow White sleeping peacefully in one of their beds. At first, they were wary of this unexpected guest. But Snow White's gentle nature and her earnest explanation of her plight won them over. They welcomed her into their home and offered her their protection. Queen Isabella, discovering that Snow White was still alive, concocted a new plan. Disguised as an old peddler woman, she visited the cottage with a poisoned lace corset. She persuaded Snow White to try on the corset, which was enchanted to tighten and suffocate her. However, the dwarfs returned just in time. freeing Snow White from the corset's deadly embrace. They chased the disguised queen away. But she vowed to try again. Undeterred, Queen Isabella devised a more insidious plan. She disguised herself as a kindly old woman selling delicious apples. She approached the cottage and offered Snow White a beautiful, shiny apple. Snow White, trusting the old woman, took a bite of the apple. As soon as she did, she collapsed to the floor, her body lifeless. The queen cackled with glee and vanished into the night. When the dwarfs arrived and found Snow White unconscious, they were heartbroken. They placed her in a crystal-clear glass coffin, which they set up in a serene clearing surrounded by flowers.
In a vast, sandy desert with rolling dunes and sparse vegetation, lived Kareem, a camel with a heart full of dreams. Kareem was different from the other camels. While they were content with their daily routines of grazing and resting, Kareem spent his evenings gazing up at the starry sky, imagining what adventures awaited beyond the desert. One night, as the sky shimmered with stars, Kareem saw a particularly bright shooting star streak across the heavens. Filled with hope, he closed his eyes and made a heartfelt wish: "I wish to travel to space and see the stars up close." Little did Kareem know that the universe was about to respond to his wish in an extraordinary way. The following day, Kareem wandered through the desert, following the tracks of an old caravan. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dunes, Kareem noticed something unusual protruding from the sand. Curious, he dug around it and uncovered a gleaming object covered in ancient symbols. It was a rocket ship, unlike anything Kareem had ever seen. The rocket had a smooth, shiny surface and was adorned with twinkling lights. A plaque on the side read, "To the stars and beyond." Kareem felt a rush of excitement. He carefully climbed into the rocket, and as soon as he settled into the pilot's seat, the rocket roared to life, its engines humming with power. The rocket began to rise, leaving the desert far below, and Kareem's dream of space travel was finally coming true. As Kareem's rocket soared through the Earth's atmosphere, he marveled at the breathtaking views of space. He floated weightlessly inside the rocket, gazing through the large observation window at the twinkling stars and swirling galaxies. The rocket's control panel was full of buttons and levers, each with its own function. Kareem, using his keen intellect and natural curiosity, figured out how to navigate the rocket. He piloted the ship through shimmering nebulae and past colorful planets. He encountered floating asteroids and gracefully maneuvered around them. Kareem felt a deep sense of wonder and joy as he explored the vast expanse of space. One day, Kareem's rocket landed on a stunningly beautiful planet filled with vibrant colors and lush landscapes. As he stepped out of the rocket, he was greeted by the Zogwarts, a group of friendly, green-skinned aliens with big eyes and playful antennae. The Zogwarts welcomed Kareem with open arms and invited him to their grand celebration. The planet was bustling with joy and music. Kareem was amazed by the alien festivities, which included dances under floating lanterns and a feast of strange but delicious dishes. The Zogwarts were eager to learn about Kareem's world, and Kareem was thrilled to learn about theirs.